Fame gave them money, influence, and millions of people who adored them. But it couldn't protect them from what was happening behind closed doors. Some became addicted while still incredibly young. Others stayed sober for years before slipping back into a battle they thought they had already won. And a few survived long enough to rebuild everything Hollywood watched them lose. These aren't simply stories about drugs. They're stories about pressure, isolation, childhood fame, and what happens when success makes suffering easier to hide. Today, we're counting down 8 unforgettable stars whose darkest battles unfolded behind the spotlight. Starting at number 8 is Macaulay Culkin. Before most kids his age understood what a career was, Macaulay was already one of the most famous children on Earth. Home Alone turned him into a global phenomenon almost overnight. His expressions were instantly recognizable. His movies made enormous amounts of money. And from the outside, his childhood looked like a fantasy. Behind the scenes, it was far more complicated. Macaulay later described an intense relationship with his father and manager, Kit Culkin, who controlled much of his early career. The acting schedules kept coming. So did the expectations. By his early teens, Macaulay was exhausted. Instead of enjoying the success everyone assumed he wanted, he eventually stepped away from acting. But leaving Hollywood didn't instantly create a normal life. Years later, photographs of an extremely thin and withdrawn-looking Culkin triggered rumors about serious drug addiction. Some of the most extreme claims were never confirmed, and Macaulay publicly rejected reports portraying him as a hopeless addict. He has acknowledged experimenting with substances, but his story is very different from the fatal cases coming later in this countdown. Because Macaulay survived the period everyone expected to destroy him. He gradually returned to acting, built a quieter personal life, and became a father with actress Brenda Song. That's what makes his case important. The danger didn't begin with one drug. It began with a child becoming a business, before he had the maturity to understand what fame could take from him. And number 7 shows what happens when that same pressure follows a young star directly into adulthood. At number 7 is Lindsay Lohan. There was a time when Hollywood seemed ready to build an entire generation around her. The Parent Trap showed her natural screen presence while she was still a child. Then Freaky Friday and Mean Girls turned Lindsay into one of the most recognizable young actresses of the 2000s. She had talent, charm, major studio offers, and almost no privacy. Then everything started changing. Her family problems were already becoming public, and celebrity culture around young stars was entering an especially aggressive era. Paparazzi followed Lindsay constantly. Nightclubs became headline material. Every mistake became entertainment. Then came arrests involving impaired driving and drug possession, court appearances, missed work, and repeated periods in rehabilitation. Suddenly, the movies became secondary. The downfall became the product. That's what makes Lindsay's story especially uncomfortable. The same entertainment ecosystem that benefited from her success also benefited from watching her lose control. Every relapse produced another cover. Every court appearance created another television segment. And the more unstable her reputation became, the harder it was for studios to trust her with major projects. But her story didn't end there. Lindsay eventually moved away from the constant Los Angeles spotlight, built a more private life, married, became a mother, and gradually returned to acting. That makes her different from several names still ahead. Her career was badly damaged. Her reputation took years to repair. But she got another chapter. And perhaps that is the real twist. The teenager Hollywood once treated like an endless source of entertainment eventually survived by creating distance from the machine that made her famous. Number 6 didn't escape that machine nearly as quietly. His collapse happened in front of millions. Number 6 is Charlie Sheen. At the height of 2.5 Men, Charlie wasn't simply successful. He was reportedly the highest-paid actor on television. His character was reckless, sarcastic, wealthy, and constantly surrounded by alcohol and women. The problem was that the chaos didn't stop when filming ended. Charlie had already developed a reputation for heavy partying and substance use long before the sitcom reached its peak. There were rehab stays, legal problems, relationship controversies, and allegations involving volatile behavior. But for years, success seemed to protect him. The ratings were huge. The money kept coming. And Hollywood has historically been willing to tolerate a surprising amount of instability when somebody remains profitable. Then came 2011. Charlie's public behavior became increasingly erratic. Interviews produced phrases like tiger blood and winning, which quickly became internet jokes. But underneath the memes was a career coming apart in real time. His relationship with the producers of 2.5 Men collapsed, and he was eventually fired from the show that had made him television's biggest star. That's where his story becomes more than celebrity spectacle. For years, the same behavior that contributed to his bad boy image was treated almost like part of the entertainment, until suddenly it wasn't funny anymore. The line between persona and self-destruction had disappeared. Charlie remained alive and continued working afterward, which separates him from the tragedies coming next. But the damage showed how fame can delay consequences without eliminating them. Money can hire lawyers. It can fund treatment. It can protect a career for a while, but it cannot make addiction harmless. And number 5 shows that prescription medication can become just as dangerous as the substances Hollywood usually associates with scandal. At number 5 is Marilyn Monroe. More than 60 years after her death, her image still represents Hollywood glamour. But the person underneath that image lived a life far less glamorous than the photographs suggest. Born Norma Jean Mortensen, Marilyn experienced an unstable childhood marked by foster care and the absence of consistent family security. Then Hollywood transformed her. The blonde hair, the red lips, the breathy voice, the carefully constructed sex symbol image. Millions adored it. But Marilyn wanted something the public image didn't always give her: respect as an actress, control over her career, and relief from severe emotional strain and insomnia. Prescription medications became part of that struggle. Barbiturates were widely used during that era for sleep, while other medications could be prescribed for anxiety and distress. For someone already struggling with sleeplessness and emotional instability, that combination carried enormous risk. On August 5, 1962, Marilyn was found dead at her Los Angeles home at only 36. Her death was officially attributed to acute barbiturate poisoning and classified as a probable suicide. Decades of conspiracy theories have surrounded the case, but speculation should not be confused with established evidence. And perhaps the documented story is tragic enough. Hollywood created one of the most desirable women in the world. Yet being desired did not mean being protected. Marilyn's image became immortal. The woman herself was exhausted, isolated, and gone before reaching 40. Her story reveals something that becomes even clearer with number 4. Addiction doesn't always begin with rebellion. Sometimes it begins with someone desperately trying to sleep, cope, or make the pain quieter. Number 4 is Philip Seymour Hoffman. His story is frightening because for years, it looked like he had already won. Hoffman never depended on movie star glamour. His power came from disappearing into other people. Capote earned him an Academy Award. Roles in Doubt, Magnolia, and The Master showed an actor capable of making uncomfortable characters feel completely human. But long before those achievements, Hoffman had struggled with substance abuse. Then came something remarkable: sobriety. For more than 2 decades, he reportedly stayed away from drugs and alcohol. That amount of time can make recovery look permanent from the outside. But addiction doesn't work that way. Around 2012, Hoffman experienced a relapse. He sought treatment, but the struggle continued away from the cameras. And that's the part people often misunderstand about relapse. 20 years of sobriety don't disappear because someone uses again. But previous success also doesn't make the next relapse harmless. On February 2, 2014, Hoffman was found dead in his New York apartment at 46. The medical examiner determined that he died from acute mixed drug intoxication involving heroin, cocaine, benzodiazepines, and amphetamines. The news devastated Hollywood. He wasn't a reckless newcomer enjoying sudden fame. He was an established actor, a father, a respected colleague, a man who had already demonstrated that long-term recovery was possible. That is exactly why his death remains so disturbing. Addiction does not care how talented you are. It doesn't respect awards, and years of stability don't eliminate the need for continued support. But number 3 involved a star whose struggle became painfully visible long before her final night. At number 3 is Whitney Houston. There are successful singers. Then there are voices that seem impossible. Whitney belonged to the second category. Her range, control, and power turned songs like I Will Always Love You into performances that became part of music history. She won awards, broke records, sold millions of albums, and for years projected an image of elegance and extraordinary control. Then the cracks became increasingly visible. Her marriage to Bobby Brown was surrounded by controversy, and Whitney later spoke openly about drug use. As substance problems intensified, the impact could be heard and seen. Performances became less predictable. Her once astonishing voice changed. And instead of responding with compassion, large parts of celebrity media turned the decline into entertainment. Whitney tried to recover. She returned to music, but the battle was far from over. On February 11, 2012, one day before the Grammy Awards, Whitney was found submerged in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton. She was 48. The official cause was accidental drowning, with heart disease and cocaine use listed as contributing factors. That distinction matters. Her death cannot responsibly be reduced to one dramatic narrative about fame or one relationship. Addiction, health, and personal circumstances were more complicated than that. But what the public witnessed was still devastating. A woman once presented as almost superhuman was struggling with something painfully human. And talent could not protect her. Neither could money. Neither could being loved by millions. Number 2 is even harder to process because he was only 23 when one night at a Hollywood club ended everything. At number 2 is River Phoenix. Hollywood didn't look at River as simply another young actor. He was supposed to become one of the greats. Stand By Me introduced audiences to an unusual emotional sensitivity. My Own Private Idaho proved he could take on far more challenging material. His performances were quiet, intense, and deeply natural. By his early 20s, comparisons to James Dean were already everywhere. And then, almost instantly, the future disappeared. On October 30th, 1993, River went to the Viper Room in Los Angeles with friends and family. In the early hours of October 31st, he became seriously ill outside the club and collapsed. His younger brother, Joaquin Phoenix, made the desperate 911 call. River was taken to the hospital but could not be revived. He was 23 years old. The toxicology findings showed cocaine and morphine in his system, consistent with the use of cocaine and heroin. The death was ruled an accidental overdose. Hollywood was stunned. This wasn't an aging performer whose addiction had played out publicly for years. River still looked like the beginning of something. That's what made the loss so shocking. A career that might have lasted another 50 years ended on a sidewalk before most people his age had even figured out what they wanted to do with their lives. His death also shattered the illusion that youth and talent provide some kind of protection. They don't. And perhaps that is why his story remains so haunting. We can imagine all the performances that never happened. But number 1 left behind a completed performance so extraordinary that it became legendary after he was already gone. Taking the number 1 spot is Heath Ledger. And there's an important myth we need to separate from the facts. Heath Ledger's death should not simply be blamed on playing the Joker. His performance in The Dark Knight was undeniably intense. Ledger transformed himself into a version of the character that audiences had never seen before. Unpredictable, threatening, darkly funny, completely unsettling. He would eventually win a posthumous Academy Award for the role. But the mythology that he somehow became the Joker and was destroyed by the character oversimplifies what actually happened. Ledger had spoken about serious insomnia. People close to him also described intense work habits and exhaustion. Prescription medications became part of his attempts to manage sleep, pain, and anxiety. Then, on January 22, 2008, Heath was found unresponsive in his New York apartment. He was only 28. The medical examiner ruled his death accidental. The cause was acute intoxication from the combined effects of multiple prescription medications, including painkillers, anti-anxiety medication, and sleeping medication. That word matters. Accidental. There is no need to invent a darker explanation. The documented reality is already terrifying. Medications prescribed for legitimate reasons can become deadly when combined. And success offers no immunity. Heath was young, acclaimed, in demand. and months away from seeing The Dark Knight become a cultural phenomenon. That's why his story closes this countdown. Not because fame definitely caused his death, not because the Joker destroyed him, but because his death proves something much simpler. Someone can appear to be reaching the highest point of a career while privately struggling with something the audience cannot see. Sometimes the brightest moment and the darkest moment can exist at exactly the same time. These 8 stories reveal something fame can never hide forever. Addiction doesn't care about awards, money, beauty, or talent. Some of these stars survived and rebuilt their lives. Others never got that chance. Which story stayed with you the most? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories about what really happens behind Hollywood's perfect image, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for the next video.